I still remember that night like it was yesterday. The house was unusually quiet, heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I had come back earlier than expected from visiting my sister, and everything felt off. The air had a strange weight, and there was this faint scent I couldn't place. I walked in slowly, my footsteps echoing in the hallway, and I could hear soft murmurs from the living room. At first I thought it was just the TV, but then the voices became clearer too clear. My heart skipped a beat, a cold shiver ran down my spine. And my mind told me to turn back, to leave, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But something inside me urged me forward. I needed to know. The closer I got, the more distorted my thoughts became. I remembered my husband laughing that morning, the easy smile I had always loved. But now, that same smile felt alien, threatening. And the voices, I recognized them immediately. One was my husband's deep, familiar tone. The other was someone I never thought I'd hear coming from my own home. It was her voice. My son's fiancée. My stomach dropped. A wave of disbelief washed over me, mixed with nausea and fear. I wanted to scream, to call my son, to run away, anything, but my legs were frozen, my hands trembling against the wall for support. I pressed my back against the hallway wall. Peeking around the corner slowly, the scene that unfolded before me made my blood run cold. They were sitting close on the couch, leaning in, whispers brushing each other's ears. My mind couldn't process it. I blinked, hoping my eyes were lying, that somehow I had misunderstood. No. The way he looked at her, the gentle touch of his hand on hers, it was not innocent. My entire world shattered in a single cruel moment. I wanted to believe it was some mistake, some misunderstanding that would make sense if only I confronted them. But deep down, I knew there was no mistake. I felt an unbearable mix of emotions, shock, hurt, anger, confusion. My chest tightened, and tears threatened to spill, though I tried desperately to hold them back. I could hear the faint tick of the wall clock, each second echoing in my ears, counting down the moments of betrayal. The living room lights cast a soft glow, making their faces look almost peaceful, completely unaware of the storm building just a few feet away. I wanted to yell, to storm in and confront them. But another part of me, part that had always wanted to avoid conflict, told me to wait. To watch? To understand. I hated that part of myself, but it held me in place as I stood there frozen and trembling. Flashes of the past kept rushing through my mind. Memories of family dinners, birthday celebrations, and quiet moments with my husband, all tainted now by what I was witnessing. Every laugh, every touch, every shared secret suddenly felt like a lie. And then my gaze fell on her face. She didn't notice me at all. She was laughing softly, leaning against him, trusting him in ways I had once trusted him. The sight made my stomach churn violently. How could he? How could she? How could my own life become a stage for this betrayal without my knowledge? I tried to breathe, but it was as if the air had turned thick. The shadows in the room seemed darker, closing in on me, while the sound of their voices became a haunting echo in my mind. I pressed my palm against my mouth to stifle a gasp. A knot of fear and anger twisted in my stomach. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to escape. But my curiosity, my need to understand, chained me there. I had to know what had led to this, what had been whispered between them. What secret my husband had been hiding from me. Time seemed to slow. I watched him reach out, brushing her hair from her face, the way he smiled making my blood boil. And then she laughed softly, a sound that would have once brought me joy, now piercing me like a knife. My mind raced. Should I confront them? Should I wait for him to leave and talk to her alone? Or should I pretend I hadn't seen anything and gather evidence? Each thought collided violently with the next, and I felt the weight of helplessness settle over me. I realized then that nothing in my life would ever feel normal again. The foundation I had built my trust and love on was crumbling beneath me, and I didn't know if I could ever rebuild it. Suddenly, the sound of a floorboard creaking under my weight betrayed my presence. Both of them froze mid-motion. The way their eyes met mine for the briefest second sent chills down my spine. I could see the shock in his eyes, quickly replaced by something that made my blood run even colder: guilt. And in her expression, I saw a flicker of panic, quickly masked by a nervous, forced smile. They were caught, but for a brief second, they didn't know how much I had seen. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I could feel the anger building like a storm inside me, ready to break. I stepped back slightly, unsure of whether to run or confront. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice felt stuck somewhere deep in my throat. I felt tears burn my eyes, and yet I refused to let them fall. Not yet, not here. I needed to hold on to some control. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to prolong my torment, he whispered something that I couldn't fully hear, a few words that made my chest tighten even more. Whatever he said, it was intimate, it was personal, and it was not meant for me to hear. My mind reeled, and a sudden wave of realization hit me. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. I turned and backed away slowly, my mind racing with questions, my heart a chaotic drum in my chest. I needed air, needed to escape the suffocating reality of what I had seen. But as I reached the hallway, I paused, hearing my son's voice in my memory, trusting both of them, believing in his love and mine. And I realized with terrifying clarity, nothing would ever be the same. My family, my home, my life had walked into a nightmare that had been carefully hidden from me, and I was trapped inside it. The sound of a clock ticking seemed deafening now, marking every second that I had witnessed their betrayal, every second that I had been powerless to stop it. My hands shook as I held onto the wall for support, my eyes darting back to the living room one last time. And in that fleeting moment, I saw him look directly at Min, not fully caught, not fully honest, but aware that I had seen everything. My stomach dropped. I knew then that confrontation was inevitable, and nothing I had prepared myself for could match the storm that was about to break. And then, before I could gather the courage to move or speak, a sudden noise behind me, a door creaking. A soft thud made me spin around. My heart jumped to my throat. Was it my son? Or someone else? And just like that, the fragile line between witnessing and becoming part of the chaos shattered. The night, the house, and everything I thought I knew had transformed into a battlefield. One where no one was innocent, and every secret threatened to destroy everything I loved. I stood there, trembling, unable to move, as the realization hit me fully. Nothing would ever be the same. And yet, even in the midst of heartbreak, a tiny spark of resolve ignited inside me. I would uncover everything. I would face the truth, no matter how devastating. But first, I needed to survive this night. I still remember that night as I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering like a drum I couldn't control. The noise I had heard, the soft thud, the creak of a door lingered in my ears, echoing with every heartbeat. My first instinct was to flee, to run as far away from this house, this betrayal, this unbearable tension. But some invisible force held me rooted to the spot. It was fear, yes, but it was also a burning need to understand. To see everything for myself, to catch every detail before it vanished into the shadows. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, and yet so alive. My senses stretched thin. Every sound and movement amplified in ways that made my stomach churn slowly. Carefully, I turned my head toward the source of the sound. The living room doorway was just a few steps away, but each step felt like walking on a tightrope over a dark abyss. I held my breath, straining to hear anything beyond the soft murmur of my husband and my son's fiancée. But now there was something new, a faint shuffle, almost like someone creeping across the floor, careful not to make a sound. My mind raced. Was it my son? Could he have come home early, somehow seeing what I had? Or was it another person entirely, someone I hadn't expected? The fear coiled in my chest like a living thing, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I took a small step forward, then another, my bare feet pressing against the cold floor. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the house itself was pressing down on me. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the subtle tick of the wall clock, but every other sound, the whispers, the shifting of weight on the couch, the sudden coughs was amplified, threatening to reveal my presence. I had to be silent. I had to move like a shadow, invisible, unnoticed, because the moment they realized I was there, everything would change, and I wasn't ready for that yet. As I inched closer, my eyes darted to the living room, and I froze. There, my husband had moved closer to her, his hand resting on her knee, brushing her fingers lightly. My stomach twisted violently. I had known he could be charming, affectionate, but this was intimate, secretive, forbidden. My mind refused to accept it. My lips pressed together so tightly that I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my ears burning as anger mixed with heartbreak, twisting into a knot that seemed impossible to untangle. Every memory of our years together, the quiet dinners, the shared laughter, the moments I had trusted him completely felt like lies, carefully constructed illusions that had now been torn apart. Then, just as I thought I could not take any more, the shuffle behind me grew louder. My heart leaped into my throat. I turned slightly, just enough to glimpse movement out of the corner of my eye, and I saw him, my son. He had arrived earlier than expected, his eyes wide, his face pale, and his hands gripping the edge of the doorway. I could see the confusion in his expression. But there was something else, too, a flicker of suspicion, of awareness that something was wrong. And in that instant, I realized the nightmare I had been silently watching was no longer just mine to endure. Now my son was stepping into it, and the fragile veil of secrecy was about to be torn apart completely. My husband's head snapped toward the hallway, and for the first time, his eyes met mine. The shock, the instant recognition, the guilt, it all flashed across his face in a way that made my heart clench painfully. I could see him searching for words, but the words didn't come. He was caught undeniably, and yet he seemed almost paralyzed, as if unsure how to react to the storm he had unleashed. And she, my son's fiancée, turned her head, her expression shifting from surprise to panic, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of fear and shame. I could feel their emotions crashing into me like waves, each one cutting deeper than the last. And I realized that nothing in my life would ever feel safe or familiar again. My son's presence changed everything. His confusion, his fear, the raw honesty in his gaze, it was a mirror of my own feelings, magnified and intensified. I wanted to run to him, to pull him into my arms, to protect him from the pain I knew he would feel once the truth fully sank in. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to see what would happen first, needed to understand the web of betrayal that had been spun right in our own home. I could hear my own breathing now, uneven and harsh. And I knew that the fragile tension in the room had reached its breaking point. Then, unexpectedly, my husband spoke, his voice low and trembling. You weren't supposed to see this?" The words were weak, almost pleading, but they only fueled my anger. I took a careful step forward, trying to keep my voice calm, though it trembled. "No, I wasn't," I said, each word deliberate, measured, like a blade cutting through the thick tension. "But now I have, and I want to know everything." The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with unsaid words and guilt too heavy to carry. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked at him almost as if begging for protection, for some explanation that would make this all make sense. But I didn't need an explanation to know the truth. I had seen enough to know that whatever secret they had shared, it had been deliberate, it had been hidden, and it had shattered the trust I had placed in both of them. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? How could he betray me like this? How could she betray my son so completely? Every thought cut through me like glass, leaving jagged edges of pain in its wake, as I stood there frozen between anger and shock. My son finally stepped forward, his voice shaking, raw with emotion. "Mom, what's happening?" His eyes flicked between us, searching for answers, for reassurance, for something to explain this impossible scene. I could see the confusion etched into every line of his face, the hurt, the fear, the disbelief. And at that moment, I realized that I was no longer just confronting betrayal. I was confronting the way it had spread like a virus, infecting everything I held dear. My son's innocence, my husband's lies. The delicate trust I had built over years, it was all crumbling. Then, as if the universe wanted to prolong my torment, I heard the soft creak of another door, a sound so faint that I almost missed it. My heart stopped. Someone else was in the house. My mind raced. Could it be a neighbor, a friend, or worse, someone who had been watching us, waiting for the right moment to step into our nightmare? The fear that had been simmering now surged like a tidal wave, threatening to sweep me away. I felt my knees weaken, and I had to grip the doorway for support, my eyes darting around, searching for the source. And just as I thought I might finally find some control, the lights flickered once, twice, and plunged the room into shadows. The sudden darkness was disorienting, oppressive, and terrifying. I could hear whispers now, hushed voices blending with the soft creak of the floor, the rustle of fabric, the uneven breathing of three people trapped in a storm of lies and secrets. Panic clawed at my chest, and my mind screamed for escape. But I stayed. I couldn't leave. Not now. I needed to see how this would unfold, even if it broke me into pieces. Then a sound of faint, almost imperceptible click caught my attention. A door at the far end of the hallway was opening slowly, deliberately, and I knew immediately that I was no longer alone. Someone else had entered, and their presence changed everything. My husband tensed, her eyes widened, and my son stepped closer to me instinctively, as if sensing the danger. I didn't recognize the figure yet, only the silhouette emerging from the darkness, and my heart froze. Whoever it was, they were deliberate, purposeful, and aware of the chaos they had stumbled into. The atmosphere in the house had shifted from tense to electric, and I realized with a sickening certainty that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The air was thick with anticipation, every sound amplified, every heartbeat a thunderous drum in my ears. I wanted to call out, to demand answers, to break the spell of silence. But I knew that the moment I spoke, everything would erupt into a storm of emotion, lies, and betrayal. I pressed myself against the wall, my palms sweating, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The shadowed figure stepped closer, and in that instant, I knew. The confrontation I had dreaded, the truth I had feared, was about to arrive in a way I could never have imagined. I still remember that night, the darkness pressing in on me from every side, making the house feel alien, unfamiliar. The air was heavy, thick with tension and fear. I could hear my own breathing echoing in the hallway, each inhale trembling, each exhale shaky. The moment the figure appeared from the shadows, time seemed to stretch and warp. I couldn't see their face clearly yet, just a silhouette, tall and deliberate, moving with purpose. The faint creak of floorboards under their weight was the only sound, yet it felt deafening. My heart hammered so loudly that I thought they might hear it before I did. I pressed myself tighter against the wall, trying to make myself invisible, praying that I could remain unnoticed. But I knew deep down that my presence and the presence of my son, standing frozen beside me, couldn't remain a secret for long. The shadowed figure paused for a moment, and I caught a faint glimmer of light reflecting off something in their hand. My mind raced through possibilities. A phone, a key, a weapon. Every scenario was worse than the last, each one twisting the pit in my stomach tighter. I felt my knees weaken, my legs threatening to give way beneath me, but I forced myself to stay still. I had to see this through. I had to know who had entered, what their intentions were, and whether this nightmare could get any darker. The silhouette moved closer to the living room, and I finally saw the face, or at least enough of it to know that it belonged to someone I should have trusted. It was the housekeeper, Rosa. My heart skipped a beat. I had never suspected her of anything, had never imagined her in the middle of this web of betrayal. Her expression was unreadable, calm in a way that made my skin crawl. It was almost as if she had known, or at least sensed, the chaos that had been unfolding in my home and had chosen this moment to step in. My husband's eyes widened the moment he saw her, his hand freezing midair. She didn't speak at first, just stood there taking in the scene like a silent judge. My son and I both felt the weight of her gaze, and it was heavier than anything I had felt before that night then. In a voice quiet but deliberate, Rosa said, "I think it's time someone explains everything." Her words were calm, almost polite, but every syllable carried authority, a sense of finality that made my blood run cold. My husband swallowed hard, and the fiancé's eyes darted between us, their shared guilt now spilling outward in tiny, uncontrollable gestures. I could feel the tension coil in the room like a live wire, ready to snap at the slightest touch. I wanted to move, to demand answers, to scream, but my body refused to obey. I was frozen by a mixture of fear, shock, and the realization that the housekeeper, someone I had never imagined would interfere, now held power over the unfolding disaster. My son, finally breaking the silence, whispered, "Mom, who is she?" His voice trembled, but there was a note of suspicion, of awareness, that made me realize he was already piecing together the truth. I wanted to comfort him, to shield him from the horror of what he was about to learn, but I couldn't. Not now. Everything was unraveling too fast. Rosa, sensing the need for authority, took a step forward, her eyes locking on my husband. "You two need to tell her what's going on. All of it now." Her tone was firm, leaving no room for denial or excuse. My husband hesitated, his lips moving as if forming words that never came out. I could see the fear in his eyes, the sudden realization that the walls he had built around his secrets were crumbling. My son's fiancée looked down, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I felt a sickening wave of betrayal wash over me again. How long had they been lying to us? How many nights had they whispered in secret, stolen moments hidden behind smiles and polite greetings? Every memory of trust now felt like a fragile thread about to snap. And then, without warning, my husband finally spoke, his voice low, hesitant, and trembling. I didn't mean for you to find out this way." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to ask him why, demand explanations, scream at the audacity of his betrayal. But I stayed silent, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. Rosa's gaze never left him, piercing and steady, a silent warning that no excuses would be tolerated tonight. The room was filled with a tension so thick I could feel it pressing on my skin, suffocating, making it hard to breathe. My son, finally finding his voice, took a cautious step forward. "Dad, what's happening? Why? Why is she here like this?" His words were careful, deliberate, but I could see the fear and hurt in his eyes, the raw vulnerability that made my heart ache. My husband's face crumpled, a mix of guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't name. He opened his mouth again, but the words came out in a broken, uncertain whisper. It's complicated. I never meant to hurt anyone. I wanted to laugh, or maybe scream. Complicated. Hurting everyone. Their casual, careless decisions had shattered our family, and now they were trying to paint it as some kind of misunderstanding. My son's fiancée finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't know how to stop it," she whispered. Her voice was small, weak, desperate, and it cut through me like a knife. I felt my own tears threatening to spill, my anger and heartbreak crashing into me all at once. Rosa stepped closer, her calm authority cutting through the storm. "Enough," she said, her voice sharp. "You have to face what you've done. No more hiding, no more lies. She deserves the truth. Your son deserves the truth. And most of all, you deserve the consequences of your choices." My husband's head fell, his hands gripping his knees, and I could see the shame etched in every line of his face. My son's fiancée shrank into herself, her tears falling silently, as if the weight of their betrayal was more than she could bear. And then, as the room fell into a heavy silence, I felt a strange sensation, a mix of dread and anticipation. Something was about to happen, something I couldn't yet predict. I still remember the cold chill that ran down my spine, the way the shadows seemed to stretch and twist in the flickering light. The house no longer felt like a home. It had become a theater of secrets. lies, and hidden desires, and I was at the center of it all, unwillingly forced into a role I had never auditioned for. Suddenly, there was a noisy, sharp, insistent knock at the front door. My heart stopped. Who could it be at this hour, in the middle of a night that had already turned into a nightmare? My husband and the fiancé both froze, their faces pale, their bodies tense. Rosa's eyes narrowed, sharp and calculating, as she moved toward the door. The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the house like a warning. I felt my pulse race, my mind spinning with possibilities. Was it a neighbor, a friend, or someone who had come to witness the unraveling of our family? I wanted to move, to hide, to escape this nightmare entirely, but my body refused. I was rooted to the spot, my eyes fixed on the doorway, waiting, dreading, knowing that whatever waited outside could either escalate the situation beyond repair or bring some twisted resolution. The knock came a third time, insistent, almost threatening, and I realized with a sickening certainty that the night was far from over. As Rosa's hand reached for the doorknob, the lights flickered once more, plunging the house into brief darkness. In that moment, everything seemed suspended. Every breath, every heartbeat, every second stretching into eternity. I could hear the subtle rustle of clothing, the soft whimper of my son, the quiet sobs of the fiancé, and my own ragged breathing, all merging into a symphony of tension, fear, and anticipation. I knew that the moment the door opened, the truth outside would collide with the chaos inside, and nothing would ever be the same again. I still remember that night, the knock at the door lingering in my ears like a death sentence. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to vanish into the shadows. But I couldn't. I was trapped in the living room, caught between the betrayal I had witnessed and whatever or whoever was waiting outside. My husband and the fiancé both froze, their bodies taut, faces pale as moonlight. And Rosa, calm yet commanding, moved with purpose toward the door. Each step she took seemed to echo in the silence, a reminder that the world had narrowed down to this one room, this one night, this one unbearable tension. I could feel my son's hand brush against mine, small, hesitant, and trembling. I held onto it without thinking, letting his warmth anchor me in a moment that felt like falling into an endless void. He whispered, barely audible, "Mom, who is it?" I wanted to answer, to reassure him, to lie, to protect him, but my throat felt dry and constricted. How could I answer? How could I explain the truth of what we had all seen and the terror that was now waiting just beyond that door? I shook my head slightly, pressing my lips together to stop a gasp that threatened to escape. My mind raced, and every possible scenario collided violently. A neighbor, a friend, a stranger, or someone who might expose everything we had hidden. Rosa's hand rested lightly on the doorknob, her eyes scanning the living room, assessing each of us with a clarity that made my heart race. There was no fear in her expression, only authority, resolve, and the quiet certainty that she was about to tip the balance of power in this room. She opened the door slowly, deliberately, and for a brief second, the shadows from the hallway spilled into the living room. The figure outside was tall, imposing, and I couldn't yet see the face clearly. Only the glint of something metallic catching the faint light. My pulse raced, each beat hammering like a drum of warning. I wanted to turn away, to shrink into nothingness, but my eyes were glued to the doorway. The figure stepped inside, and the light revealed their face, or at least enough of it to make me freeze completely. My stomach dropped. It was my son's father, his father by adoption, a man I had known and trusted for years. But there was something different about him tonight. His eyes, usually kind and gentle, were sharp, calculating, and carrying a weight of anger I had never seen before. He stopped just inside the door, taking in the scene with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The tension in the room spiked so suddenly that it felt as though the walls themselves were closing in. My husband's face went pale, his usual charm gone, replaced by guilt and fear. The fiancée shrank back on the couch, her hands twisting nervously. Realizing that the truth she had been hiding from more than one person was now fully exposed. Everyone. Stay where you are, the man said, his voice low, steady, and unmistakably authoritative. No sudden movements. There was no room for argument. His presence, his tone, the sheer certainty of his commands silenced the room immediately. I could feel the fear in my chest twist into something darker, sharper, almost like a blade slicing through my thoughts. My husband opened his mouth to speak, but he hesitated, as though measuring the consequences of every single word he might say. The fiancée's face turned white, her lips quivering as if trying to form excuses that wouldn't matter. I gripped my son's hand tighter, needing to anchor myself. But even that small comfort felt fragile under the storm of tension pressing down on all of us. My son's father, finally looking directly at my husband, spoke again. You've been lying. Not just to your wife, not just to me, but to everyone around you. This ends tonight. Each word landed like a hammer blow. I felt the floor shift beneath me, the weight of everything crashing down in waves. I wanted to cry, scream, run, but I couldn't. The room seemed suspended in time, each heartbeat echoing like a warning, each breath carrying the scent of betrayal, fear, and secrets waiting to explode. My husband finally spoke, his voice trembling. It's not what it looks like. But even as he said it, I could see the lie hanging in the air, obvious, fragile, and unsustainable. The fiancé tried to say something, a weak protest, but my son's father raised a hand, silencing her instantly. Save your words, he said, his eyes never leaving my husband's face. I want the truth, every detail, and I want it now. The authority in his voice made my husband flinch. For the first time, I realized that he wasn't just afraid of me, or of exposure. He was afraid of this man. This figure of authority who had suddenly stepped into our lives and altered the course of the night. I felt a chill run down my spine as my son's father began moving closer, each step deliberate, measured, and full of intent. My mind raced. What would happen next? Would he punish my husband, demand answers, or simply walk away, leaving the devastation in his wake? I could see the fiancée shrink under his gaze, tears forming in her eyes, and I felt an odd, complicated mix of fear, relief, and anticipation. Relief because someone else now held control, someone who could force the truth to surface. Fear because the consequences of this truth were unknown and terrifying. And then, in a quiet, almost imperceptible voice, my son's father said something that made my stomach twist. You've involved more people than you realize. Secrets like these don't stay hidden forever. And tonight, everyone will know the full story. His words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I could feel the weight of them pressing down on me, suffocating, making it hard to breathe. My mind flashed to my son. How would he handle the truth? How would he respond to the betrayal of someone he trusted, someone he had cared for? My chest tightened, and I felt a surge of protective instinct, a desperate need to shield him from the pain that was clearly coming. Suddenly, there was a noise, a crash, the sound of something hitting the floor in the next room. All eyes turned toward it instantly. My heart leaped into my throat. What now? Who else was in the house? Had someone else been hiding, waiting, listening? I felt my body tense, every nerve on edge, every sense alert. The shadows in the room seemed darker now, thicker, as if the night itself had taken on a life of its own, pressing in from all sides, hiding secrets in every corner. My husband's eyes darted to the source of the noise, panic flickering across his face. It's nothing, he stammered, but even he didn't believe it. The fiancée clutched at his arm, her tears falling freely now. And I realized that whatever had just happened had shifted the balance of power once again. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a premonition that the night was far from over, that each new revelation would be worse than the last, and that we were all trapped in a storm of secrets we could no longer control. Rosa, ever calm and commanding, took a step toward the hallway where the noise had come from. Go see, she said, her voice steady but tinged with warning. Find out who or what is there. Then come back and face the truth. My son's father nodded slightly, moving toward the hallway, his steps deliberate, eyes sharp, scanning the shadows. I could feel my own pulse racing, a tight, painful rhythm that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to follow, to hide, to scream, but I couldn't move. I was stuck, forced to watch, forced to wait as the next layer of this nightmare began to unfold. And then, as the hallway grew darker with every step he took, a faint whisper reached my ears. It was soft, almost indistinguishable, but it carried a sense of urgency, fear, and warning. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a shiver down my spine. Something was happening, something beyond betrayal. Beyond lies, something I couldn't yet understand, but that promised to change everything. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a cage of tension, fear, and suspense. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the night had only just begun. I still remember that night, the air thick with tension, heavy with the smell of fear and betrayal. Every heartbeat thumped painfully in my chest, a relentless drum of panic and disbelief. The phone in my hands, proof of the affair, felt heavier than any physical object I'd ever carried. I could barely process what I was seeing. Messages, pictures, small details I had never wanted to know. Now glaring at me in cold, merciless clarity. The fiancée's face was pale and tears streaked down her cheeks, each one reflecting the dim light like a silent confession. My husband sat frozen, his usual charm replaced by shame, guilt, and fear, while my son stood stiffly beside me, his eyes wide, trying to process a truth that no one had prepared him for. Rosa stepped forward, her calm presence like a shield in the chaos. "Now," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "I want everyone to be honest. No lies, no hiding, no excuses." The command held the room in its grip. My husband opened his mouth to speak, and then closed it again, as if the weight of his guilt had made it impossible to find words. The fiancée's hands twisted nervously, the tears in her eyes threatening to spill over completely. And my son's face mirrored a storm of emotions, confusion, hurt, anger, and disbelief. I could feel my own emotions roiling inside me, a mixture of heartbreak and fury that made my hands tremble. Finally, my husband spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened." His words hit me like a slap across the face. "Happened?" I whispered back, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "Happened? Do you realize what this has done? Do you understand what you've destroyed?" The room seemed to shrink around us, every wall pressing closer, the shadows deeper. The tension so thick, it felt like it could crush me. My son's father, standing near the hallway, watched silently, his presence a reminder that no excuses would be tolerated tonight. The fiancée finally spoke, her voice shaking. I didn't want this. I didn't know how to stop it. I tried." Her words trailed off, choked by tears and guilt. I could see the raw honesty in her fear, but it didn't lessen the betrayal in my eyes. I wanted to scream, to shake them both until the truth came spilling out in full, to demand every detail so I could understand the depth of their lies. But I stayed still, my body trembling, letting the tension build, knowing that every word now mattered, that the revelations to come would shape the rest of our lives. Rosa's eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating. "Enough of the vague explanations. I want names, dates, details. Every single moment you tried to hide." Now, my husband's shoulders slumped under the weight of her words, and I saw the fear in his eyes deepen. He was cornered, trapped, and no amount of charm or manipulation could save him. The fiancée shook her head, looking terrified, while my son's eyes darted between them, trying to grasp the full reality of the situation. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, each second stretching unbearably long. Every breath filled with anticipation and dread. Suddenly, there was a movement behind me, a subtle shift in the shadows that made my heart leap. I spun around, expecting the worst, but saw nothing. Yet the sensation remained, prickling my skin, hinting at someone else in the house, someone we hadn't accounted for. My stomach tightened. Was it another friend? A neighbor? Or someone with an even darker purpose? The uncertainty made the room feel smaller, the tension almost unbearable. My son noticed it too, his body stiffening, his hand gripping mine tightly. And I realized that the night's unraveling had not yet reached its peak. Before anyone could speak, my son's father stepped forward, his gaze fixed on my husband. "You've crossed a line," he said, his voice steady, calm, but edged with steel. "You've betrayed your family, your son, and everyone who trusted you. And now it's time to face the consequences." I could feel the truth in his words, the undeniable weight of responsibility finally confronting my husband. The man's usual confidence had vanished entirely, replaced by something raw, human, and vulnerable. My son's father's presence was more than authoritative, was the mirror that reflected every lie, every secret, every betrayal, leaving no escape. My husband opened his mouth again, struggling, fumbling, trying to defend himself. But the words faltered under the gravity of the moment. I never wanted to hurt anyone," he said weakly. But the sentences dissolved into silence. The fiancé shook, sobbing softly as if the truth itself was unbearable. My son's eyes were wide, his jaw tight. And I realized he was trying to process the incomprehensible, the man he trusted, the woman he loved, and the sanctity of our family all fractured in a single night. Rosa stepped forward, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. "You've all made choices tonight," she said. "Choices that cannot be undone. But before we go any further, there's something you need to see." Her hand moved toward the phone, lifting it carefully. The screen glowed faintly in the dim room, illuminating images and messages, timestamps. Locations, all proof of the hidden affair. My heart sank further. I had seen it already, but now with Rosa holding it. The evidence felt even more deliberate, more damning, more undeniable. The fiancé gasped audibly. "No, please, not this." Her voice was small, almost a whisper, but it cut through the room like glass. My son's father didn't flinch. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. My husband's hands shook, and I could see the shame etched deeply into his face. The weight of exposure pressed down on everyone, suffocating, heavy, unavoidable. I wanted to look away, to shield myself from the evidence, from the raw truth. But I couldn't. I had to see it all, absorb every detail. Because this was the moment that would define everything after. Then, suddenly, a noise, a subtle creak from the upstairs hallway, made all of us freeze. The room's silence was broken, and the tension ratcheted higher. Who was there? What else had been hidden from us? I felt my pulse spike, my body rigid, every sense alert to the possibility of another revelation. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally in the dim light. And my stomach churned with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The night's chaos was far from over, and I could feel deep in my bones that more secrets were about to come crashing down on all of us. My son stepped closer to me, his voice trembling. "Mom, what now?" I wanted to answer, to comfort him, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain that the night was far from over? That each new sound, each shadow, each step might carry yet another truth we weren't ready to face. I could see this same mixture of fear and resolve reflected in his eyes. And I realized that whatever came next, we would face it together, even if the revelations threatened to destroy us completely. Rosa finally spoke again, her voice calm but commanding. "Someone is still here," she said, "and we need to know who it is before this night ends." My stomach dropped. I realized with a sinking feeling that the final confrontation, the one that would lay bare every secret, every betrayal, every hidden truth, was about to happen. The house seemed to hold its breath with us, shadows thickening, every noise amplified, every second stretching into eternity. I pressed myself closer to my son, gripping his hand tightly, bracing for the storm that was about to break. I still remember that night, the house silent, except for the echoes of our racing hearts and the faint hum of the refrigerator somewhere in the kitchen. The crash from the other room still reverberated in my ears, each vibration a sharp reminder that nothing was as it had seemed. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples, a relentless rhythm that made every nerve in my body tense. My son gripped my hand tighter, his warmth and trembling a fragile lifeline in the storm of betrayal that surrounded us. I wanted to reassure him, to whisper that everything would be okay, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I promise that when the night had already shattered everything we knew? Rosa, steady and commanding as ever, moved toward the hallway where the noise had originated. My son's father followed, his expression unreadable but tense, a mask of authority that barely concealed the storm of emotion underneath. I could feel my husband shrinking back on the couch, guilt and fear written clearly on his face. The fiancée was trembling beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, tears streaking down her cheeks. The air in the room was thick, heavy, almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension and were pressing down on us. Each second felt drawn out, each breath a struggle, and I realized that I was witnessing a moment that would forever change the course of our lives. From the hallway came a faint sound, a scraping, soft but deliberate. I could hear it clearly, and my stomach twisted with dread. Someone or something was moving through the shadows, searching, watching, waiting. I wanted to look away, to hide, to escape the fear that threatened to consume me. But I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the hallway, to the shadows, to the figures moving in ways that made my pulse spike with every step. The suspense was unbearable, each sound a sharp arrow of tension, each flicker of light a signal that something more was about to be revealed. My son's father paused at the hallway entrance, his eyes scanning the darkness with a precision that sent shivers down my spine. "Who's there?" he called, his voice calm but firm, slicing through the thick tension like a knife. There was no immediate answer, only the subtle rustle of movement, the whisper of something brushing against the floor. I could feel my chest tighten, my breaths coming shallow and fast, each one a desperate attempt to stay composed in a room that had become a battlefield of secrets and lies. My husband's hands were clenched tightly on his knees, his face pale, and I could see the flicker of panic in the fiancé's eyes. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. My heart stopped. It was someone I had known but never expected to see in that moment, a close family friend. One we had trusted implicitly for years. Her expression was a mixture of fear, shock, and determination, and in her hands gelled something that gleamed faintly in the dim light. I couldn't tell exactly what it was at first, but the way she held it, the intensity in her gaze, told me immediately that it was significant. She had come not by accident, but with purpose. And that purpose was now colliding with the chaos that had been building for hours. Rosa's gaze sharpened instantly. "Step forward," she commanded. The friend complied, her movements hesitant but deliberate, as if each step carried a weight of consequence she could barely bear. My husband's eyes widened, my son's face paled, and the fiancée buried her face in her hands, her body trembling with fear. The room felt smaller now, each of us packed into a space that had once been safe, now transformed into a crucible of tension, suspense, and truth. Every heartbeat felt magnified, every breath a countdown to revelation. The friend finally spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "I saw everything," she said. "I didn't mean to, but I did. And now you all need to know that secrets like this can't stay hidden." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees weaken, my chest tightening as anger, fear, and disbelief collided inside me. My husband's face turned an ashen gray, guilt written clearly in every line, every expression. The fiancée peeked through her fingers, her eyes wide, filled with terror and shame. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't find my voice. I was trapped, caught between wanting to flee and needing to witness the unfolding truth. My son stepped forward, his voice low, trembling, but filled with a sudden, fierce determination. "Mom, what's happening? Why didn't anyone tell me?" His words cut through the tension like a blade, sharp and painful. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him as much as on me. The betrayal wasn't just between adults. It now touched him, threatened to engulf him, and I realized with a sickening clarity that nothing would ever be the same. My son's father moved closer to him, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. But even that small gesture couldn't fully shield him from the emotional hurricane raging in the room. Then, without warning, my husband tried to speak. I can explain, but he stopped abruptly, seeing the look in Rosa's eyes. The weight of authority, the silent warning that no excuses would be tolerated. I felt a rush of anger, a fiery wave of betrayal and hurt that surged through me. How dare he try to justify what he had done after shattering our lives? How dare he attempt to soften the truth with words when his actions had already spoken volumes? I wanted to step forward to demand answers, to make him face the reality of the chaos he had caused, but I stayed rooted to the spot, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. The friend, still holding the object in her hands, finally revealed it. It was a phone, its screen illuminated with messages and pictures proof of the affair. The whispers, the stolen moments that had been hidden from us for months. My heart lurched violently, a mix of horror and disbelief coursing through me. The fiancée gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, and my husband's face paled even further. My son's eyes widened, horror mirrored in his expression. I felt a wave of nausea, the room spinning around me. Yet I forced myself to remain standing, to absorb every detail, every word. Every proof of the betrayal I had witnessed and now had confirmed. Rosa stepped closer to the phone, her eyes narrowing as she read the messages silently. This changes everything," she said quietly. Her tone was calm, almost clinical, but the weight of her words pressed down on all of us. The house, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a crucible of truth and consequence, where every hidden action was now exposed to the harsh light of reality. I could feel the tension rising, each second dragging out longer, each heartbeat a reminder that the night was far from over. And then, as if the night itself wanted to torment us further, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into shadows. I could hear the subtle shift of movement, the whisper of something behind me, and my pulse spiked with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Someone or something was still in the house. The sense of dread was suffocating, pressing against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. The room felt alive with tension, as if every shadow, every sound, every heartbeat was conspiring to keep us on the edge, to make us confront truths we had been avoiding, and to force us into decisions that none of us were prepared to make. Rosa's voice cut through the darkness, calm but commanding. "Everyone, stay where you are. Nothing leaves this room until we have answers." My heart raced, my palms sweating, my mind spinning with possibilities. What more could be revealed? How much worse could this night get? And in the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, faint but deliberate, suggesting that the night's revelations were far from complete. I knew then that we had crossed a threshold. Nothing would ever be the same again. I still remember that night, the way the house felt alive with tension, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. The faint creak from upstairs had thrown everyone into silence, each of us straining to hear, to anticipate, to brace for whatever or whoever was about to appear. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat, loud, insistent, like a warning drum. I clutched my son's hand, feeling the small tremors run through his fingers. And I realized that he, like me, was suspended between fear and the desperate need to understand everything. Rosa's gaze moved slowly up the staircase, sharp and calculating. "Go," she said softly to my son's father. "Find out who it is, and be careful." His expression hardened with determination. He stepped lightly, deliberately, each footfall measured, moving toward the unknown presence upstairs. My stomach twisted with apprehension. Every step he took seemed to echo in the house, and I felt the shadows leaning closer, pressing down on us all, suffocating in their quiet intensity. My husband and the fiancé were frozen on the couch, their faces pale, guilt and fear etched deeply into their expressions. I could barely breathe, my mind spinning with questions, possibilities, and the terrible anticipation of what might be revealed. I tried to focus to steady my racing thoughts, but it was impossible. The tension in the house was thick, pressing against my chest like a heavy weight. I could hear the faint shuffle of footsteps above, the subtle scrape of movement on the floorboards. My imagination ran wild with possibilities. Another person involved in the betrayal? A friend? A neighbor? A stranger with their own agenda? Or perhaps something worse. The uncertainty was unbearable, and I felt my pulse spike with every passing second. My son squeezed my hand tighter, his eyes wide. And I realized he was sensing the same fear that gripped me. Suddenly, voice, low, unfamiliar, and dripping with tension, came from upstairs. "You shouldn't be here." This was a whisper, but it carried authority and danger. My chest tightened as a wave of dread swept through me. The house, which had been a place of comfort, had transformed into a theater of secrets, lies, and impending confrontation. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, suffocating and unavoidable. My husband swallowed hard, his hands trembling, the guilt on his face almost unbearable to witness. The fiancée cowered, hiding her face, and my son stared, frozen, unsure whether to react or remain still. The footsteps moved closer to the staircase edge, and I could see the shadow of a figure beginning to take form in the dim light. My son's father froze momentarily, his gaze sharp, scanning, assessing. I felt the tension coil in my stomach, a tight knot of fear, anticipation, and adrenaline. This was the moment where everything could change, where hidden truths could explode, and the consequences of betrayal could finally come crashing down. Rosa's calm voice cut through the tension again. "Everyone, stay where you are. Do not move until we know who it is." Her words were a lifeline in the storm, but they did nothing to calm the fear gripping me. Then, without warning, the figures stepped forward, fully revealing themselves. My heart lurched violently. It was someone I had never expected to see, someone I had considered a friend, a confidant, someone I trusted. And yet, in this moment, the realization hit me like a physical blow. They had known more than I ever imagined, had witnessed things they shouldn't have, and had waited until now to step into the chaos. Their eyes met mine for just a moment, calm, piercing, almost unreadable, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I couldn't look away, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure held something in their hands, an envelope, slightly crumpled, worn at the edges as if it had been carried for a long time. "This," they said, their voice quiet but deadly serious, "changes everything." The words echoed through the room, resonating with a weight that made my chest tighten. I felt my knees weaken, my stomach flip. What could possibly be in that envelope to make someone enter a house in the middle of the night? Knowing the tension, knowing the chaos. My husband's face went pale. The fiancé's tears increased, and my son's eyes widened in disbelief. Rosa moved slightly closer to the figure, her posture commanding, eyes narrowing as she tried to assess the situation. "Show it," she said. The figure hesitated, then slowly opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, pictures that captured moments of betrayal and deceit, moments that no one had seen until now. My chest tightened as I looked, unable to turn away, unable to deny the raw evidence before me. Each image was a dagger, each frame a testament to lies, secrets, and actions that had been carefully hidden. The fiancée gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, while my husband's hands trembled as he tried in vain. To cover his shame, my son's father stepped forward, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with a controlled anger. "Do you see now?" he asked, voice low but firm. "Do you see what has been hidden in the shadows? Do you see the choices that have led to this chaos?" I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on all of us. My son looked at me, his eyes wide, and I felt a tear slip down my own cheek. He was too young to carry this burden, too innocent to face such heartbreak, yet here we were, trapped in the storm of someone else's mistakes. The envelope contained not only pictures but also letters, messages, receipts, every shred of evidence of a secret that had been carefully hidden for months. I felt nausea twist my stomach as I realized the depth of betrayal, the extent of lies, and the web of deceit that had been spun around us. The house seemed smaller, darker, more oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in to witness the fallout. My husband sank to his knees, his hands covering his face, shaking uncontrollably. The fiancée sobbed quietly, her body hunched. And my son buried his face in my chest, seeking comfort I wasn't sure I could give. Then, without warning, the envelope slipped from the figure's hands, falling to the floor with a soft thud. The movement startled us all. And in that instant, I realized something terrifying. The envelope wasn't the only secret. There was more. Someone else was still in the house, hiding, watching, waiting. The faint sound of movement, almost imperceptible but unmistakable, came from the corner of the room. Shadows shifted, and I could see the outline of another figure, crouched, silent, intent on observing everything. My heart raced faster than ever. I pressed my son's hand tighter, my own body trembling, and I knew with a sick certainty that the night was far from over. Another revelation was coming, something even darker, even more unexpected. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, the house itself seeming to breathe with us. Alive with secrets, betrayals, and truths yet to be revealed. The air was suffocating, electric, alive with suspense. And I realized we were trapped in a storm of chaos from which there was no escape. I still remember that night. The shadows in the room seemed to move with a life of their own, twisting and stretching as if mocking us. The air was heavy, electric, filled with the weight of secrets that could no longer be contained. My chest ached, my palms were clammy, and every nerve in my body screamed that the worst was yet to come. I could feel my son's trembling hand in mine, gripping tightly, a small anchor in the storm. But even his presence couldn't fully calm the chaos swirling around us. The second figure, the one I had glimpsed only in the corner moments ago, suddenly stepped forward. My heart froze as I saw who it was. It was my brother, someone I trusted, someone I had believed would never betray me. His eyes, wide and intense, reflected fear, anger, and something darker, something I didn't yet understand. In his hands, he held a small envelope, similar to the first. And the way he approached was deliberate, cautious, yet full of urgency. Every step he took seemed to reverberate through the room, making the walls feel closer, the shadows thicker, and the night itself heavier. Rosa's sharp gaze immediately fell on him. "Explain yourself," she commanded. Her voice carried authority that cut through the tension. Even her calm demeanor could not hide the severity of the moment. My brother swallowed hard, his lips quivering as he spoke. I didn't know how else to stop it. I found out everything earlier today, and I knew if I didn't act, it would get worse." Its words hung in the air, heavy with implications, and I could feel a mix of relief and dread washing over me. Relief that someone else knew the truth and wanted to stop the chaos. Dread because the truth he carried could tear apart what little stability remained. My husband's face went ashen. The fiancée shrank back, her tears flowing freely now, her voice a whisper of regret and fear. My son, his eyes wide and full of confusion, whispered, "Uncle, what are you talking about?" I could barely respond, my own voice stuck in my throat, choked by the weight of what was unfolding. The room seemed to contract, the walls pressing closer as every hidden truth began to surface. I realized then that the night had become a crucible, exposing every secret, every betrayal, every lie. My brother opened the envelope slowly, revealing photographs, messages, and documents that confirmed not only the affair but also other deceptions I had never imagined. Each image was a dagger, each piece of evidence a brutal reminder of the web of lies we had been caught in. The fiancée gasped, covering her mouth, while my husband sank further into shame. I felt a sharp twist of anger in my chest, not just at them, but at myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for trusting, for believing in a stability that had never truly existed. Rosa stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Now we know there's more than one betrayal," she said. "This night has layers none of us were prepared for. And the question now is, who else has been keeping secrets? Who else is involved?" Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I realized that even with the evidence we now had, the night wasn't over. The storm was far from done. I pressed my son closer to me, feeling the tremors in his body as we both tried to brace for whatever was coming next. Then, a sudden noise upstairs, a floorboard creaking. The faint shuffle of movement made us all freeze. My brother's gaze hardened. "They're still here," he whispered. My stomach twisted. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, charged with anticipation. Every shadow seemed to twitch and shift, every sound amplified, and I realized that the night was far from finished. Another secret, another confrontation, another revelation was coming. And there was no turning back now. My husband finally tried to speak, his voice weak, trembling. "Please, I can explain." But the words died in his throat when my brother held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "There's nothing left to explain yet," he said, his tone sharp. "We need to see the full picture first. Every detail matters tonight." I felt a surge of tension so strong that my chest ached. I had never seen him like this, my brother. Usually calm, now tense and determined, holding the power to expose everything, to unravel every hidden thread. The fiancée began to sob quietly, her hands twisting in her lap. My son's father, still standing near the staircase, stepped forward, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. "Someone else is here," he said firmly, "and we need to find out who before this night ends. Secrets left hidden in the dark will destroy us all." His voice, steady and commanding, made my husband flinch. I could feel my son's body stiffen as well, and I pressed a hand to his back, trying to reassure him even as I felt my own anxiety spike. Then, without warning, a small sound came from the kitchen, a subtle, almost imperceptible shuffle of movement, followed by the faint clinking of metal. My heart jumped into my throat. "What now?" my son whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't answer. There were too many unknowns, too many hidden dangers. The night had become a labyrinth of secrets, betrayals, and impending revelations, and I felt the pull of something terrible about to surface. Rosa's eyes narrowed. "Stay here," she said, pointing toward the living room. "Do not move. Watch and listen. We cannot afford to miss anything." My son and I pressed closer together, our bodies trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The house seemed to hold its breath with us, every shadow a threat. Every whisper of movement a signal that the night's revelations were not done. My husband's face was pale, his hands shaking, while the fiancée hid her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I felt my chest tighten further, the pressure almost unbearable. And then, suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows of the kitchen doorway. My breath caught. It was someone I had never expected, the person whose presence explained the last subtle movements, the whispered threats, the undercurrent of tension. They stepped fully into the dim light, revealing a face familiar yet terrifying in its intent. I felt my knees weaken, my hands trembling as my heart raced faster than I thought possible. Whoever this was, they carried with them a secret that would change everything. A truth so shocking it threatened to shatter what little remained of our world that night. I still remember that night, the way the air seemed to thicken around us. Every shadow now a potential threat, every sound amplified 100-fold. The figure from the kitchen stood there, motionless for a moment, their eyes scanning the room, sharp and calculating. My chest tightened so much I could barely breathe. I gripped my son's hand tighter, feeling his tremble against mine. He looked at me, eyes wide, as if asking silently, "Who is that? What's happening now?" I didn't have an answer, only the raw, terrifying truth that the night had spiraled far beyond anything I could have imagined. Rosa stepped forward cautiously, her posture tense, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the thick, oppressive air. The figure's gaze met hers, unwavering, almost cold. "I'm the one who knows the truth no one else wants to see," they said, their voice low, steady, and full of purpose. My stomach twisted. The truth. Could it be worse than what we already knew? I felt a chill crawl over my skin. The envelope my brother held suddenly seemed like the tip of an iceberg. And I realized that the night's revelations were far from over. My husband shifted uncomfortably, sweat glistening on his forehead. The fiancée's sobs had stopped, replaced by a tense silence, her body frozen in fear. My son's father moved closer to the stairs, keeping his eyes on the newcomer, every muscle in his body coiled and ready. I felt a wave of dread. Who was this person, and what did they know? The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, stretching toward us like dark fingers. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, my thoughts racing, trying to anticipate the danger that was growing more real by the second. The figure stepped closer, holding out a hand, revealing another envelope. Everything you think you know. It's only half the story, they said. My chest tightened even more. Half the story. How much worse could it get? My husband's face turned an ashen gray, the guilt and fear etched deeper into every line. My son's eyes were wide with confusion, hurt, and the dawning realization that nothing would ever be the same again. I felt my throat tighten, wanting to scream, to demand answers. But no sound came out. Rosa's gaze flicked between the figure, the envelope, and my brother. "Explain," she said sharply. The figure hesitated, their eyes scanning each of us, as if calculating the right words. The perfect impact. The affair. "It's not the only betrayal," they said finally. "There are other lies that stretch back months, secrets that involve more than just your family. If you want to survive this night, if you want the truth, you need to see everything now." My stomach dropped. More betrayals. I felt a wave of nausea. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. My mind struggling to process the weight of what was coming. The fiancée whimpered softly, "No, please don't." But her voice was drowned by the rising tension in the room. My husband sank further into his chair, his hands covering his face. My son pressed closer to me, seeking comfort I could barely give. Every second stretched, the silence heavy, waiting for the final revelations to be revealed. Shadows seemed to move around us, the faint flicker of light casting long, exaggerated shapes on the walls, making the tension almost unbearable. Then the figure handed the envelope to my brother. He opened it slowly, revealing documents, photos, and text messages, evidence that not only confirmed the affair, but also proved a series of deceptions no one had suspected. Each page, each image, each message hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt my knees weaken, my hands tremble. My husband's face was pale, his lips trembling as he tried and failed to form words. The fiancée buried her face in her hands, crying silently. My son's eyes filled with tears, and I could feel the depth of his heart break even through the numbness of my own. Rosa stepped forward again, eyes sharp. "This isn't just about the affair anymore," she said. "This is about trust, loyalty, and the choices everyone made. And now we have to face them." My chest tightened, a mixture of fear, anger, and desperation twisting inside me. I realized that the night had become a crucible where every lie, every secret, and every hidden truth would be exposed. There was no going back, no pretending. We were at the edge of a revelation that could destroy us completely, perhaps finally set us free. Suddenly, a loud crash came from upstairs, the unmistakable sound of furniture being overturned. Everyone froze, hearts racing. My son's father gritted his teeth. "They're coming down," he said. The figure from the kitchen took a step back, eyes wide. I felt panic rise in my chest. Who was coming? Another hidden person. Someone with a different agenda. The sound of footsteps thundering down the stairs followed, shaking the floorboards, echoing in the room, and sending a wave of terror through all of us. My husband tried to stand, to intervene, but the weight of shame and fear held him in place. The fiancée whimpered softly, tears streaming down her face. My son clung to me, whispering, "Mom, what's happening?" I could only shake my head slightly, unable to answer, unable to prepare him for the chaos that was about to descend. Rosa moved quickly, positioning herself between the newcomers and us, her body tense and ready for confrontation. I could feel the tension in the room crackling, almost electric, every nerve in my body alert to the approaching danger. Then, in the doorway, they appeared, figures, more than one. Shadows in the dim light, faces obscured, but presence undeniable. My heart leaped into my throat. The night had brought one revelation, then another, but now it seemed to demand the ultimate confrontation. Every secret, every betrayal, every hidden truth we had uncovered so far was about to collide with forces we hadn't anticipated. The air was thick with suspense, dread, and fear. And I felt a cold chill run down my spine, realizing that the final act of the night had begun. I still remember that night, the room charged with an unbearable tension. Every shadow seeming alive, every heartbeat thundering in my chest. The figures in the doorway were no longer just shadows. They were people moving closer, revealing themselves fully under the dim light. Each one carried an expression I could barely read, some angry, some fearful, all tense, and I realized that the chaos of the night had grown far beyond my imagination. I pressed my son closer to me, feeling the tremor of his body through mine. And I whispered, though I wasn't sure I had the strength to say it aloud, "Stay calm. Stay calm." Rosa's stance was protective and commanding. She moved slightly forward, blocking the path of the newcomers, her eyes locked on each of them. "Identify yourselves," she demanded. The tallest of the figures stepped forward, his voice low, calm, but with an unmistakable authority. "We are the ones who have been affected by the lies," he said. My heart sank. Lies. There were more people affected. My chest tightened painfully. How many more secrets had been hidden from me? And how much longer would this night keep revealing betrayals I wasn't ready to face? The fiancé let out a small whimper, and my husband's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the couch. I could feel the weight of shame, fear, and guilt radiating from him. My son, his wide eyes filled with confusion, whispered, "Mom, why didn't anyone tell me?" I didn't have an answer, not one that could explain the storm of emotions raging in the room. I felt my own tears welling, my chest aching, my mind a whirlwind of anger, grief, and disbelief. The newcomers stepped fully into the room, revealing envelopes, papers, and devices, proof of deception, betrayal, and secrets none of us had anticipated. My brother moved quickly to intercept one of the envelopes, and the taller figure handed it to him. "Every lie has been recorded," he said. "Every hidden truth has been kept. It's time the family knows everything." I felt nausea twist in my stomach. Every revelation we had uncovered so far now seemed like a small fragment of a much larger, more dangerous truth. My husband sank further into his chair, his face pale, and the fiancée covered her mouth, tears flowing freely. My son's father stepped forward, eyes dark and sharp. "Everyone, listen carefully," he said. "We are not here to judge. We are here to confront the truth. Everything that has been hidden must be spoken now." His voice, calm yet commanding, seemed to cut through the fear like a knife. I could feel the tension pressing down on me, on everyone in the room. Each second stretched painfully, filled with anticipation, dread, and the need to uncover what had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. Then my husband tried to speak, his voice weak, faltering. "Please, I can explain." He was silenced immediately by a glance from Rosa. "No excuses yet," she said sharply. "We need to hear every truth. No lies, no deflections. Start with the beginning." My chest tightened further. I realized that the night had become a crucible where every hidden action, every betrayal, and every secret would be exposed. I could feel my body trembling, my son clinging to me as if seeking the strength I wasn't sure I had. The tallest figure handed an envelope to my brother, who opened it slowly, revealing photographs, text messages, and receipts, evidence that proved not only the affair but also other secrets we hadn't imagined. Each piece of proof felt like a punch to the chest. My husband's face went pale, his lips quivering as he attempted and failed to form words. The fiancé's sobs increased, and my son's eyes filled with tears of shock, confusion, and heartbreak. I pressed a hand to my son's back, whispering reassurances that I barely felt myself, my chest aching with grief and disbelief. Rosa stepped closer, her gaze fixed on everyone in the room. "This is about more than just betrayal," she said. It's about truth, accountability, and facing the consequences of choices made. Tonight, everything is laid bare. My heart pounded, each word she spoke echoing with the weight of inevitability. I realized then that the night's revelations would change us forever, that nothing we thought we knew could remain intact. The shadows seemed to lean closer, the silence thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final truths to emerge then. A sudden noise of faint movement behind the couch made us all freeze. My heart leaped into my throat. Another person. Another secret waiting to be revealed. The shadows seemed to quiver with anticipation. I pressed my son tighter against me, feeling his small body shaking. The fiancée shrank further into herself, silent but terrified, while my husband's hands clutched his face in shame. I could feel the tension in the room spike, a pressure so strong it was almost physical, pressing against my chest, my head, my heart. Rose's voice broke the silence, sharp and commanding. "Show yourself." The figure behind the couch hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. My stomach twisted as recognition hit MIT was the housekeeper, someone I had trusted for years. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear but also determination. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," she said. "I've known about things that have been hidden for months. I tried to warn someone, but no one listened. Tonight, I had to come forward." My heart sank further. Betrayal upon betrayal. The night seemed endless, each revelation darker than the last. The housekeeper stepped fully into the light, placing a small envelope on the coffee table. "Everything you've been told is only part of the truth," she said. "The rest is here. Read it and you will understand how deep the lies go." I felt my knees weaken. Could we survive the next wave of truth? Could my family endure even more heartbreak? I could feel tears streaming down my face, my chest tight with emotion, my mind racing with fear and anticipation. Then my son's father moved closer to the envelope. "We have to see this," he said. "If we are going to survive tonight, we have to face everything. No secrets remain." My hands trembled as I watched him open it. Inside were messages, receipts, and photographs, proof of manipulation. Hidden plans and actions that none of us could have imagined. The air in the room grew heavier, suffocating, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The night was far from over, and the final confrontation, the ultimate truths, were about to be revealed.